President, I am here today to join the chorus of opposition to Todd Blanche's nomination as Attorney General of the United States. Things that Republicans have purported to care about are disasters with this guy. Pam Bondi put the blame directly on Todd Blanche for the Department of Justice's foul up with the Epstein files. That foul up was pretty deadly serious for the women who were victims who had managed to keep that fact private until Todd Blanche and the DOJ fouled that up and put out their names, put out their addresses, put out their photographs, in some cases put out photographs with very little clothing on. Complete disruption of the lives of the victims of Epstein's depravity. Complete incompetence from a document production point of view. And on the other side, this guy actually participated in the Epstein cover-up. Remember that there was a witness who spoke to FBI agents about having been assaulted by Donald Trump when she was about 14 years old, physically assaulted and sexually assaulted. She spoke to the FBI at least 4 times. Those 4 times were recorded in FBI 302s. A 302 is the FBI name for the witness statement that the agents write up after an interview. So 4 times this woman had been interviewed about what had happened to her as a girl. 3 of those 302s specifically mentioned Donald Trump. In the disclosure that Todd Blanche made under the Epstein Files law, the only one of the 4 that got disclosed was the one that didn't mention Donald Trump. That ought to be disqualifying right there. Luckily, some very sharp investigators realized through gaps in bait stamp numbers that documents were missing and that the 3 302s had not been disclosed. And so Blanche was forced to cough those up. But behind a 302 come the agent notes. And there's still 37 pages of documents related to that are still suppressed, that are still covered up, that look to be the agent's notes, which should have been disclosed. So the cover-up continued with respect to allegations against Donald Trump. Where else did the cover-up continue? Well, the Treasury Department sent to the Department of Justice what are called suspicious activity reports. A suspicious activity report is what you get when international banking transactions look like something funny is afoot, look like there is, for instance, money laundering going on. In this case, it was money laundering and human trafficking concerns that provoked the suspicious activity reports. Well, you don't have to be a genius investigator to look at a suspicious activity report and deduce that it might have something to do with some suspicious activity. It's the title of the report, for Pete's sake. Billions of dollars of transactions were behind those suspicious activity reports. How many were investigated by the Blanche Department of Justice? 0. Turned a complete blind eye to that whole aspect of the Epstein files, even though the suspicious activity reports were right in front of them. And then he goes running down to Tallahassee to interview Epstein's comrade in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell. Did he use that interview to develop any new information, to go after people who were culpable in the Epstein files? No. He used that interview to extract exculpatory comments from her about Donald Trump. Oh, that he was a perfect gentleman. And the next thing you know, she's rewarded with a transfer to a club-fed type prison. What's the excuse for that? Oh, she was at risk. We felt she was in danger. Well, look, I've been around law enforcement for a long time. This is the first time I've ever seen a prisoner allegedly in danger be transferred to a less secure setting to solve the problem of danger. Right? You move the prisoner to a more secure setting, not to a less secure setting. It makes no sense. So in the Epstein files, Todd Blanche's fingerprints are all over the screw-up and the cover-up. Then we move on to the slush fund and the Trump family tax fraud amnesty, which was cooked up in a deal surrounding a federal court proceeding, which was such a mess that the judge in that federal court proceeding has gone back to look at what the heck happened. She was looking at whether something happened called fraud upon the court. You probably haven't heard of fraud upon the court. It's unusually rare. It is a thermonuclear ethics accusation. We've looked. In the history of the Department of Justice, fraud on the court has not even been alleged against any senior DOJ official, ever, ever. And here you have a court that opened a proceeding, an inquiry into whether or not there was fraud on the court, and that's still pending. There is still every reason to believe that Blanche may be found culpable for putting a fraud on the court together to cook up the slush fund tax amnesty scheme. That is pretty unheard of. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon in this Blanche Department of Justice. There is a cascade of criticism from federal courts about misconduct by this Department of Justice. Misconduct that is unprecedented. I will tell you, I was the U.S. Attorney for the District of Rhode Island. If judges had used words like this about my attorney's conduct in their courtrooms, there would have been consequences. At a minimum, there would have been staff meetings. There could have been referrals to the Office of Professional Responsibility. There could have been apologies required to the court. There could have been a reboot, internal office discipline of what's going on with this case. But when a judge says that the government's argument is disingenuous, when the judge says that the government's argument is a pretext for something else, when the judge says that the government has engaged in bad faith, each one of those is a 4-alarm fire word. In medicine, there are things that they call never events, things that should never happen in a hospital that you protect against. These are never event words coming from federal judges. And yet they are commonplace in the corrupted Department of Justice run by Todd Blanche. As to his complicity in the Epstein files cover-up, I offer a letter from Epstein survivors to Senators Tillis and Cornyn and ask that that be incorporated at the end of my remarks.
Without objection.
With respect to the destruction of the Department of Justice that he has wrought, I would also ask that we add George Will's column called Against Todd Blanche.
Without objection.
And with respect to this litany of criticism of the honesty of the Blanche Department of Justice, I would like to add a ProPublica article entitled Federal Judges Chastise Trump's Justice Department for, quote, unlawful, quote, unethical, and, quote, unseemly conduct, whose first sentence begins, across the country, federal judges are calling out Department of Justice lawyers, questioning in unprecedented ways whether they can be trusted to tell the truth or uphold centuries-old legal norms. I ask unanimous consent for that.
Without objection.
And then this isn't just a problem in American legal communities. There's a global magazine called The Economist magazine, which, by the way, does not run liberal. It's a fairly conservative publication. The cover story in the July 18th Economist is a picture of the Department of Justice logo and the title, Degradation in Process. I asked that the Economist magazine article, there are actually two. One is the opening article that they lead with before they get to the main article, and the second is the main article. That the two articles about the degradation of the Department of Justice under Todd Blanche be added to the record as well.
Without objection.
Last, there's a group called Just Security, which keeps track of what goes on in federal courts. This is a binder of the cases that they have put together in which a federal judge is harshly criticizing the integrity or the competence of the Department of Justice. This binder, frankly, should not exist. This is two-sided, by the way. These many cases, it is just astounding. I'm not going to ask that this all be put into the record, but I will note that if you look at justsecurity.org, you can look at their report published on March 19, 2026. It gets regularly updated. And if you want to go through it, you can see truly appalling criticisms by federal judges of every appointment background against incompetence and dishonesty by the Blanche Department of Justice. Where that really hits the road is with something called the presumption of regularity. You all might not know what the presumption of regularity is, but it's a benefit that the government enjoys. That as a matter of policy, the federal judiciary has determined that the federal government is generally so honest and competent that its proceedings will be given the presumption of regularity. That the benefit of the doubt will go to the Department of Justice lawyers and to the government agencies involved. Unless the adversary can prove otherwise, courts will presume that the government has done the right thing, and over again we have seen judges say that presumption of regularity is now shot because there is so much dishonesty and incompetence coming out of the Department of Justice. That is unprecedented. There are hundreds of other reasons to vote against this most reprehensible Attorney General nominee in American history, but the very specific ones about his complicity in the Epstein files screw-up and cover-up, his being the first senior Department of Justice official in the history of the United States to face a fraud on the court inquiry where the judge already decided that the proceeding was a sham and that the parties were in collusion with each other and that the whole thing was done in bad faith, and that that's not an isolated incident, that is part of a pattern of incompetence, dishonesty out of the Department of Justice that has never before happened in the United States.
Amen. Good evening. This is Elder G. Now, you know, I don't pull no punches, right? I have made a decision in my life that I'm going to tell you the truth. And whatever consequences come, those consequences come. Because I believe that the truth is more important than a lie. I believe that God is who he say he is, and that God is able to do whatever he say he can do. And I believe that Jesus died on Calvary for the sins of the world, and he set the captives free. I don't care what you say, or what kind of smoke you try to blow up people's nose. As a man of God, and I stand firm on it, we all go to school. It's against the law in the United States not to go to school as a minor. And I know what they teaches you in school. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they teach you how to comprehend. You can't graduate from high school without knowing how to read and write and do math and to comprehend. You can't graduate without knowing that. So to try to blow that bull up my nose, you just wasting your breath. Because I know from my experience of 69 years of living, I can discern from my educational background and what the law says that there is people that spend the rest of their life in prison on circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence, it means that they don't have no eyewitness. They may have your shoe print. Or they may have your handprint, but they don't have a fingerprint. Or they may go by your MO. A MO in law term is the method that you use of your motive or operation. Okay, so when you break into a house, you're a burglar. When you break into the house, you always go to the back window. And you always either break a window out. If a door got a window, you break the window out. And you don't leave fingerprints. So what the cop does, they look at your motive of operation, what they call your MO, your method of operations. And then they take that to a judge and they tell the judge, no, we don't got no fingerprint. We don't got no eyewitness. But the tennis shoe that he had on, the print matched the print that was at the crime scene. The size of the tennis shoe, a 10 and a half, is the size of the tennis shoe that Elder G wear. The car that Elder G was driving is the same car that looked like the same car that we impounded. And they present that to a jury. So I get indicted. And then I go to trial. And then the jury takes that information and decide if I'm guilty or not. The Bible says in order for something to be confirmed, you don't need trail jurors. You don't need a judge. You don't need a prosecutor. You don't need a defense attorney. The Bible says all you need to make a decision is 2 or 3 eyewitnesses to the thing. Just think about all of these young ladies that was abducted and bought and sold for sex slaves. You got all of those young ladies testified that Donald Trump sexually assaulted them. But because he a billionaire, you don't give a damn. Because ain't no way a billionaire would have any need to sex traffic young girls as young as 9 years old. There ain't no way the president of the United States could do that. Bill Clinton was president, and even though Monica Lewinsky was old enough, he still took advantage of her. Even though John F. Kennedy was president, he still had an affair with Marilyn Monroe. See, all of this stuff that's happening now is because of white prejudice. There's some black prejudiced people. There's some Mexicans and Asian and Native American. But 90% of white men are prejudiced. They prejudice against black and brown people, and they prejudice against women. And they prejudice against any other white person that want to treat black and brown people fair. That believe black and brown people reserve the same respect as everybody else. Todd Blanche, he is trying to become the Attorney General of the United States, the highest law enforcement agency in the country. And Todd Blanche is a liar. He's a thief, and he don't work for the American people. He told you at the hearing that he worked for President Trump. And everybody know that that's a lie. And the church, the so-called preachers and the head of the churches, they sit back and they don't say nothing. So it's not like I'm picking on the politicians. I'm more offended by the church that's supposed to look out for righteousness, that's supposed to look out for justice, that's supposed to look out for integrity. That is what Christ called us to do. And when you lose integrity and you lose respect for God and Christ and for the Constitution and rule of law, see, I know that you done lost respect for me too. So the federal government that's ran by Donald Trump, they done lost all respect for me. I don't respect them because I know that they do not believe in the Constitution. Your daughter got kidnapped. Your daughter got taken to an island as a sex slave. As young as 9 years old. They was impregnated by people like Trump, like Epstein, and possibly Bill Clinton. And I'm sure that other people that's in the Congress that's fighting so hard to protect Epstein. Just think about your best friend for 20 years. This is your best friend, is Jeffrey Epstein, for 20 years. Y'all go to the same party. Y'all like the same young girls. The reason why someone is your best friend, because y'all like the same kind of women. Y'all like going to the same kind of parties. Y'all like eating the same kind of food. There ain't hardly nothing that I don't know what my best friend like. When I throw a party, I'm gonna throw a party that my best friend like. How do you expect for black and brown people and women to respect the law when the very people that's supposed to enforce the law is the biggest criminals and the biggest liars in the world? I done told you on my broadcast that my grandson is in prison right now. He got 15 years. He pleaded guilty to it because he wanted to get a shorter period of time in jail instead of trying to get the max. Now, what they said my grandson did was he tried to rob a person at a car wash, a person that he thought was a criminal. So he figured he could rob that criminal and there won't be no consequences because the person he robbed, he considered to be a criminal. So when he tried to rob the people, some shooting started. And my grandson was shooting, and the people that he was trying to rob was shooting after him. They even shot into his car. But luckily, my grandson got away, and he got 15 years instead of being dead. So I know how the system works. And yeah, I love my grandson, but I'm not going to lie to protect my grandson if he did wrong. If you do the crime, I used to watch Beretta. Don't go to bed with no price on your head. Don't do it. Don't do the crime if you're not willing to do the time. My grandson did the crime, so my grandson is going to do the time. I ain't going to lie and try to cover up my grandson's crime, and I ain't going to try to break him out of jail or to lie and commit a crime to try to keep him from going to jail. I told you, my brother that's right under me, he went to prison he got a 55-year sentence, and he ended up doing 35 years flat. I couldn't prove whether my brother was innocent or guilty, but he said he was innocent. That's what he said. That's what he told us. But can I prove it? If I could have proved it, he wouldn't have had to spend 35 years in prison. So I didn't go try to break my brother out of prison, and neither did my brother try to break out of prison. Whether he was guilty or not, he did the crime. He did the time, He did the time. Black people and brown people is going to prison all the time for nothing. Because a lot of those crimes they didn't even do. But they pleaded guilty just so they can get a shorter sentence. Instead of getting 30 years, they'll get 15 years. And the lawyer advised them the chances of winning is slim. So the best thing for you to do is try to get the shortest amount of time possible. See, when the law don't work for everybody the same, then the black and the brown people and the women, they start saying to themselves, the law itself is unfair. The Supreme Court is supposed to be blind to what color you is. The Supreme Court is supposed to be blind to who you love. The Supreme Court is supposed to be blind to if you rich or poor, or what race you are. It's supposed to be totally blind. It's supposed to look at the facts and the facts only. This is what I know, and this is what I'm willing to die for. I'm willing to put everything on the line because I know what a lie is. President Trump was impeached twice. Every American know that. So don't give me no bull. And I'm mad. Because I know you know. I know you know. So to say you don't know is an insult, and it makes me fire mad. That you're going to take my tax dollars and you're going to take that job where you're supposed to look at facts, and you're supposed to look at facts only. President Trump was impeached twice. That's a fact. That's how I know you're a liar. And I'll call you a liar until the time I go into the grave. President Trump sexually assaulted Eugene Carroll in a dressing room. He was convicted of a jury of his peers. And Eugene Carroll got $5.6 million for being sexually assaulted by Donald Trump. Donald Trump paid Stormy Daniels, a prostitute, $10,000 to have sex with him right after his wife had had a baby. And then when he ran for president in 2015, he gave her like $135,000 to keep quiet, to cover it up, so he can get elected president. President Trump was charged with 34 felonies for that. In New York, they picked a jury, and President Trump was convicted of 34 felonies. President Trump can file corporate bankruptcy at least 6 times. Trump Airline, Trump Cheese, Trump Wine, Trump University, Trump Charity, Trump Casino. He drove them all in the ground. And then MAGA is going to say that this man that can file bankruptcy 6 times, that been impeached twice, that been convicted of 34 felonies. His corporation has been convicted of fraud. They're going to say what a good businessman he is, and everybody know that that's a lie by every standard that you can use. President Trump is the biggest liar that ever lived in my lifetime. And the Attorney General, he holds information that we pay him for to prosecute. President Trump is mentioned thousands and thousands of times in the Epstein file. One girl said President Trump got her pregnant and then he killed the baby. And that girl committed suicide. I sit in the front of the TV on January 6th, and I watched the whole thing. I watched those prejudiced white people storm the Capitol and threaten to hang Mike Pence and defecated in the Capitol building. And broke windows and beat police officers. And the Attorney General is going to say, ain't nothing here to see. We know that you can't trust Donald Trump. Now we can't trust law enforcement because the chief law enforcement officer is corrupt. He's evil. And these prejudiced Republicans is going to make him the Attorney General, become the highest lawmaker in the land to protect an evil president and an evil Supreme Court and an evil House of Representatives and an evil United States Senate. Never in history have a president took $45 million to put on a birthday party for himself. $61 million for his 80th birthday party to have a UFC fight on the White House grounds. Or to spend $16 million on a reflection pond that they only painted and did a bad job at that. $16 million. $6 million to put gold on statues. He tore down a wing of the White House that will cost over $230 million to replace. My God. I ain't been to no other country, but I done seen them on TV. And I ain't never seen nothing so evil than what these prejudiced white people is sitting back letting Donald Trump do. He's covering up for people that rape your daughter and some of your sons and impregnated them and then turn around and ate the child that they impregnated them with. And the Attorney General and the President and the Vice President and the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court is covering it all up. That make them involved. My son went to prison for 7 years. He tell us that he took the guy to the store. And the guy went in the store and he robbed the store. And he came out and he got in the car and he drove away. So my son say he didn't know the guy was going to rob the store. But you know what the law says, right? Ignorance of the law is no exception. You can't play ignorant. It's your duty as an American citizen is to know what the law is. So my son ended up accessory after the fact. He didn't go in the store and rob. He just took the guy to the store. He admit he took the guy to the store, but he didn't know they was going to rob it. He ended up doing 7 years in prison, and he never went inside the store to rob it. Did my son know I wasn't there? I don't know. He my son, but I'm not going to lie for him if he really robbed it. So he couldn't prove that he didn't do it. So he had to end up going to prison. My son didn't try to break out of prison. He just did his time. He wasn't happy, but he did his time. See, right now, we see the president and the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court and the Justice Department. They committing more evil than anybody in the United States. I can't trust them. I can't trust them with my life. I can't trust them with my freedom. I just can't do it. And that's what the Bible tells me. If you say thou shalt not steal, and then you turn around and kill, if you say you shall not commit adultery, and you turn around and kill, you just as guilty as anybody else. President Trump is no good to the core. Vice President Vance is no good to the core. Mike Johnson, John Thune, and John Roberts are prejudiced white men that's so afraid of losing power. And the reason that they so afraid is because all the evil that they perpetrating upon black and brown people and women. They're taking away our civil rights that we're not going to let you do. We're not going to let you take away our freedom. You ain't no better than us. And we ain't no better than you. But don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me I don't know the difference between right and wrong. And I don't know the difference between good and evil. Everybody knows President Trump is evil. And the only reason that the prejudiced white people ain't doing nothing because they just as evil as Donald Trump. Birds of a feather flock together. Jesus said, you either got to make the tree good and its fruit good, or you got to make the tree corrupt and its fruit corrupt. You can't serve God and man. You are that close to a civil war. Not because somebody is attacking this country. The only somebody that's attacking this country in the Constitution is President Trump. And the MAGA in the House of Representatives, and the MAGA in the United States Senate, and the MAGA in the Supreme Court. Those are the ones that's violating the law and violating the Constitution. Because we all supposed to be equal under the Constitution, and that's just not happening. I'm being frank. I'm being straight up. When there's no justice, there can't be no peace. When you treat the evil people like they godly people, there can be no peace. I don't believe in violence. But I ain't gonna let nobody try to take away my freedom. It's up to you what you gonna do. But I'm not gonna tuck my tail and go over there in a corner when I see all the evil, when I see all the injustice, I'm going to put my trust in Jesus. And I'm going to let God lead me and guide me in the way that he would have me to go. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to survive. And I hope and pray that you do the same thing. God is with us. He's not with MAGA. He's not with the president and the vice president and the majority in the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court. God is against them. If God is against them and you with Christ, you should be against them too. Thank you.